Welcome. You're listening to The Best of Investing. I'm your host, Edward Brown. Today, we do have a couple of special guests, John Klinkhamer and Cole Sundt. And let's see here. The title of this show is Triple Your Rental Property Income. Now, a little bio here. John has been working in Arizona real estate since 2002. Over the course of his career, he's been involved in hundreds of transactions and financed over $100 million in private money loans through Klink Loans Fund. Let's see, Klink Investors. Okay, so it's www.klinkinvestors.com, which specializes in private money loans in Arizona. And as an investor, John has personally fixed and flipped many homes and manages rental property. Both John and Cole, welcome to The Best of Investing. How are you guys?
Great, Edward. Thanks. Great to be with you today.
Good. And you guys, what part of Arizona are you at right now?
We're in Gilbert, so suburb of Phoenix.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I think I know where that is, and it's not. It's starting to cool down a little bit now. Now's a good time to be there.
Finally,
we're finally hitting the great time of year. Usually Halloween is when we're like, yes, we've survived the summer.
All the heat comes. All right. So first of all, tell us a little bit about Klink Loans.
Yeah, you bet. Our mission is to increase the joy of real estate investing. So what I've found as an investor is that when you own real estate directly, whether you're fixing, flipping, or doing a rental, there's a lot of work, a lot of risk, a lot of steps, and people can get overwhelmed by that. And it takes a good chunk of time. It's either a part-time job or a full-time job to really do it well. And our mission is to give an option for investors who want to do something passively, who want to get the benefits and the return of real estate, but let a professional company manage that investment for them. And we do it via hard money loans. So we lend money to fix and flippers and bridge loans like rentals and commercial properties.
All right. So what are some ways that real estate investors who own rentals can increase their total return of the equity and cash in their rentals?
Yeah. So what I've found when I was a young man in my 20s, I bought rentals. And when markets are appreciating strongly, that's a very powerful way to think about growing your net worth and growing your equity in those properties. But cash flow isn't really that great. And those who are listening or watching this show today and they're trying to do rentals right now know that cash flow is pretty tough right now. Properties are more expensive and the interest rates are higher. And the rents have risen, but not compared to what the payments, the total cost of that property is. So the cash flow isn't good. And in Arizona anyways, I can't speak to every market in the country, our market is basically balanced, meaning the values aren't appreciating heavily right now. And when properties are appreciating heavily, you're getting a lot of gain. Your other ways you're making money is from your cash flow, which isn't very good, and your tax benefits, which at least are consistent on rentals. But what we found is that once investors have equity in their property, they can roll it into a fund like ours and earn about 10%, which is about triple, 3 to 4 times what the ROI, or certainly the ROE, return on equity is. If you look at how much equity you have in that property and divide your cash flow by that, a lot of investors with rental properties will see their return is maybe 3%, maybe 4%, which may not even be keeping up with inflation for those dollars. And with private money debt, you have an opportunity to about triple that income.
Okay, so you have a real estate fund, and is it both hard money loans and ownership of real estate in there?
We just are a lender, so we're just in that secured first position debt. The only time we become an owner is if a borrower doesn't pay, then we can own that property. So that's more of a default strategy. All of our loans are backed by that real estate, but we're not in the direct equity position, which means if the value drops a bit, it doesn't affect the value of our investment.
What's the average loan to value in the loans that you have in your fund?
Our portfolio is about 70%, and that's about where we try and keep it, plus or minus a little bit. Okay. So that's a nice cushion. For those not familiar to loan to value, that would mean like $1 million property, we have about $700,000 lent. So that property could drop 10%, even 20% in value, and it doesn't impact our $700K. So we have a nice cushion of that equity from the loan to value that
it's an unleveraged fund, isn't it?
We have a small amount of leverage. We have about 30%. So for every million, we can borrow $300K. That allows us to keep the return really high and keep the investor equity performing and earning money all the time. but that's a pretty low level of risk. I've seen funds that have
It
like
is.
a
I mean, if you can keep
200%
the leverage
lever.
under 40, yeah, if you can keep it under 40%, that's going to be fairly conservative. How large is the fund?
We're about 50 million.
Okay, that's good size. All right. And is it residential and commercial or property or just residential? That's both?
That's right. Our majority is residential. That's a lot of our background and a lot of our connections. But we do owner occupied commercial, like we're funding a medical complex this weekend that a pediatrician this week that a pediatrician runs and owns that property. And that's a nice loan for us, owner occupied, small
Oh,
commercial.
yeah. Yeah, he's going to
Yeah.
want to protect that for sure. All right.
Yes.
So tell us about the Arizona real estate investing market and the advantages and disadvantages to investing in Arizona. I presume that you're lending in Arizona only?
We lend in Arizona only currently. We're looking to open up in some future states, maybe Florida and Texas, where we have some strong deal flow and teams on the ground. But right now, Arizona, and the main reason for us for Arizona is we know the market. We live in Arizona, investment properties here, so we really have a pulse and a feel for the market. But it's a very active market for those investors who maybe aren't familiar with Arizona. We have a lot of people moving here, even in slower times and recessions. We've had population growth that's been absolutely bananas over the last. I've been in Arizona almost 30 years, and it's been wild. It's been really really strong, and so we like that, and we like that there's a lot of jobs. We have a lot of tech and semiconductor manufacturing, real estate, a lot of white collar jobs, a lot of blue collar jobs. We've just got a fair amount of activity. And it's a good lifestyle. People who move here tend to like it. Our summers are tough. Obviously, that's kind of like our hard season. But the rest of the year is really wonderful. It's a great standard of living and a great lifestyle. It's relatively safe. Our traffic, what we have is bad traffic. People come from other places that have real traffic, and they're like, "You don't have real traffic." When you talk about it like a tough commute day, that's really not
Yeah.
bad compared to a lot of big cities in the U.S.
And are you lending in all of Arizona, or do you have special pockets?
Yeah, we specialize in Maricopa County, the Metro Phoenix
Yeah.
area, so Phoenix and all the suburbs, which is about 6 million. It's a really active area, but we have a couple of outlying larger cities like Flagstaff, Tucson, Payson, and Prescott that are really wonderful markets, and there's a lot of good investment activity there. So we'll lend in most places in Arizona.
Okay. Well, again, you know the area. And what have you learned from past failures and investments that didn't go well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've learned that it's really important to know the property, and ultimately, the most important question we ask is, would we want to own this property if they don't pay? We want our borrowers to be successful, and we work really hard for that. But if a borrower can't make their payments, can't pay us off, we're going to own that property. And when that's happened, and it's a property we're excited to own, that's great. And occasionally, when we haven't thought about that well and we've ended up with a property that we're not excited to own, those have been some of the more challenging
I
defaults
think
that we've
you're
had.
not
So
loan to
that's,
own. You're not loan to own guys,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
tough
we're
to
not
take.
predatory, but every lender has to think that way because you can't
Yeah.
control what the borrower's doing. And so you have to be prepared for that eventuality. And we've definitely learned that really good properties that we'd be excited to own and sell is gonna be the best kinds of
Yeah.
loans.
Um, the foreclosure laws in Arizona how are they? Because like California's
Yeah,
tough, New York's tough.
yeah. Yeah, they're very strong towards the lender. So we're a deed of
Oh,
trust state versus a mortgage state. And so that means that our foreclosures are what's called non-judicial. They don't go through the courts. We're just set up with a legal trustee, which is often an attorney. And as long as they follow the state statutes on the foreclosure process, it doesn't go through a court. So we're not dependent upon a judge or a jury or a long drawn out legal procedure. And it's very quick. In mortgage states, foreclosures can take 6, 12 months, even longer in some states. In
yeah.
Arizona, it's 3 months, it's 90 days. So it's pretty quick. If we don't get paid, we can initiate foreclosure very quickly, and the trustee sale is going to come up really quickly in 90 days.
And actually, you can choose to go judicial if you want. If there's like a personal guarantee on an
That's
LLC
right.
that's the loan, so I mean, you can choose
Yeah.
which one you want to go. Yeah, because
Yeah.
California's like
There is
gets
Yeah,
dragged
there
out.
is the flexibility. We have found in most cases it's best for our fund to keep the best performance in the fund, to go the non-judicial route and just take care of the default quickly.
Yeah, I've got a loan where I bought this one at a discount, and this guy hasn't paid since 2001. Yeah,
You're 4 years
24,
in.
24 years,
Holy
and it's
smokes.
amazing how it's in New
Wow.
York. and they know how to work the system, and it's just incredible. And the guys filed
I
bank like 3 times, like in the last
oh
year.
man.
And then, I mean,
Yeah.
at some point,
Oh
you're hoping the judge is going to say,
yeah.
"Hey, wait a minute, haven't I seen you? Like,
Yeah.
don't you have like a cot in the
Yeah.
back because you stay here so
Yeah.
often?"
Oh
Kind of crazy.
man. I've heard New York is the toughest. And we've only
Yeah,
had one loan in default where the borrower filed bankruptcy. And for
yeah,
us, it was a very stressful situation because I'd never been through it before. But it was about 10 days, like $2,000-3,000 in legal defense on our side. And basically they're like, yep, you're a secured creditor. This is the property, proceed with the foreclosure. And I was like, wow, had been really nervous about what going through a bankruptcy with a borrower would be like in Arizona. They're not
yeah.
all that fast, but
Well, yeah, because usually bankruptcy, I mean, isn't it more of a federal situation?
it is.
Yeah, and
That's
as long as you're secured, that's why it's so funny. People talk about like sometimes okay, because I've been in the lending business for a long time, and people will want to an unsecured loan, and I tell them, I say I wouldn't give Warren Buffett an unsecured loan. You
yeah,
know, no, I want it secured by real estate. So
yeah. It,
my
it's
hats
a
off to you.
wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling, right, Edward? As a lender, when you go, all of these dollars are backed by this real estate, and
Yeah,
we send to our investors the addresses, the exact loan amount, so they have full transparency. They can see and click on a map, and it's
yeah.
absolutely incredible that you have that confidence knowing that that real asset is backing all the dollars
Yeah, I mean,
when you're in a debt position.
I've had situations too where it was like, I'm glad the guy filed bankruptcy because now he's got to file a
Mm-hmm.
plan, and I still
Mm-hmm.
get payment. Maybe not as much as
Mm-hmm.
I wanted, but at least I'm getting something. So I get
Mm-hmm.
that. Um,
Yeah.
how do you manage the risk associated with private lending, and how do you track the markets you lend in?
Yeah, yeah. The property, like I mentioned earlier, is big. We actually run credit and criminal background on our borrowers and references, which a lot of hard money lenders, they sell their loans like, hey, we don't do credit checks. To me, I can't fathom that. I want to know who we're lending the money to and what their pattern is. So that's a big part of managing the risk for us. The number one risk measurement really is that loan to value. That question you asked, Edward, that's just so critical because that ultimately is going to be your cushion if things don't go well. And then I would say the third piece that we use is we study the supply and demand in our market religiously. And we're able to do that in Arizona. We have an index called Cromford Index, and it literally measures on MLS what's the supply of listings and what's the demand. And the relationship between supply and demand always determines, are the values going up or are they going down or are they balanced? Right now in Arizona, they're roughly balanced. We have some markets that are buyers market going down a bit, some that are still sellers and going up, but at least we can know for every loan what's happening there. And our loans are short term, on an average about 3 or 4 months until the maturity date comes up on our loans. That's a short enough leash that if we don't like what we're seeing in the market, then we can call those loans due or ask the borrowers to pay down that principal, or we can cross collateralize. We can do something to protect the value of that loan.
So I've had a couple of situations, where a broker has brought me a deal, and the property looked okay, everything was okay, but it was like, yeah, and then you look at their credit, and their credit score is really low, and I look at it and I say, it's just not worth it. Because this person's proven that they're going to be a problem, and if I was gunning for the property, and if I was 25% loan to value, then maybe it might be worth going through the mental exercise. I had another situation where this broker, where you mentioned about doing criminal background checks. Few years ago, there was a broker who I really like, and he's given me some good deals in the past. And he called me up and he said, Edward, I've got a property that I think is in your neck of the woods. And I looked at it and I said, oh my gosh, this property literally is less than a quarter mile from where I live.
Mm.
Yeah, I said, I know the property. I said, that sounds really good. Send me the file. And the borrower had a really odd name. And so I decided to Google his name. And sure enough, this guy was going to be going away for, I think, 30 years to life for espionage. I mean, we're
Wow.
talking like that's the big pokey for that one. And I called him up. I called up the broker. I said, listen, I go, you got to do a little more due diligence on this stuff. I said, I could just imagine funding that loan, and then suddenly the feds show up at my house thinking I'm somehow involved in this, and maybe just my loan goes away for whatever reason. So that's
Yeah.
my hat
Oh
on that one.
man. Well, good job. Good job checking, digging into it.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what? And I can relate to some of these mistakes too. Cole, do you want to chime in here? You've been listening the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm just smiling and nodding along. One thing we do really well too is we've learned Arizona is a very small market, right? So when we have a borrower that comes to us, we often just ask our friends in the industry, like, hey, have you guys lent to them? Are they a good borrower? Do they borrow on time? And a lot of time we've had lenders tell us, hey, don't mess with that guy.
Yeah.
Don't lend to him. So we have a blacklist that we keep to as well to make sure our borrowers
All right.
are
Yeah, we had
yeah,
a situation like that in the 90s where
yeah.
it was so funny actually. This borrower came to us, and it was again, I was only in the business for about maybe 5 years, and it was the property was just like in an A plus 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 location. I mean,
Mm,
you could not have gotten in a better location. This borrower though was a little squirrely, and
mm,
but our loan was only 25% loan to value, and when it was one of those where he came to us when the property was literally going on the courthouse steps, and so when we showed up, the current lender looked at us and he because we said, yeah, we're going to pay you off, right here at the sale, and he says, are you sure you want to lend to this guy? We're not going to say anything bad. We don't want to get sued, but are you sure that you really want to lend to this guy? Well, come on,
mm.
actually, you know what? We were 10% loan to value, not 25. We were
Jeez.
10% the
Wow.
value. And I said, well, come on, how could, what could go wrong? Well, the guy didn't make one payment, and
Mm,
for a year and a half, he had us in bankruptcy, or he had us in court for no less than 18 times. And
jeez.
here's the funny thing: it was a $190,000 loan. The property was worth almost 2 million. My legal fees were $150,000. And thank
Wow.
goodness the judge allowed all of it, because if he didn't, I
Yeah.
would have gotten really stuck, right? Well,
Yeah.
we do the foreclosure. It goes to the courthouse steps. And now it's like 25% loan to value. Property's gone up in value, and the new lender says, "Yep, I'm going to pay you off at the foreclosure sale." And we said, "Are you sure you really want to lend to this guy?" And back
Mm,
then we were charging 15%, and I think we charged them 5 points.
Mm,
And I looked up, they said, yes, I made money on it, but the mental anguish wasn't worth it.
mm.
And so again, I
yeah.
never left that guy, no
Yeah.
matter what the circumstances are. So,
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
guys do some
Yeah.
checking and
We we,
so to speak?
I've learned that same lesson, Edward, the hard way. When I first started lending, I could get a much higher yield than what we're getting today
Yeah.
in terms of interest rate. And the highest interest rate loans I got, which I was very excited about, of course, as a lender, those tended to have the most hair on it. They were the most, you know, problem borrowers, problem situations, most distressed. And even if the yield came out higher, what I found is that it wasn't worth it. And certainly
Huh.
for us as the manager handling with all that, but even to investors, when we used to do things fractionalized, where investors would be directly on the deed of trust,
Yeah.
and investors like that, that feels very secure. But what they often don't recognize is that you're directly tied and concentrated in that one property and one borrower. And
Yeah.
so they didn't get their payments. They had to fork up some legal fees, or else we had to. And so there's capital calls in that kind of situation. And the stress of that, like you're describing, just isn't worth it. What we found is we'll cherry pick lower risk loans, which make a little less yield. We're still making really good yield, but less than what we could. But because the portfolio performs at a really high percentage, it's just more peaceful, joyful experience for our investors, and then certainly for our team.
So now you're doing just your fund and not individual deeds of trust?
That's right. We converted it to a pooled fund because we found that investors would be far more diversified,
Yeah.
protected. They'd have a much more passive experience. We'd have liquidity. So in our fund, investors can ask for their money back after 6 months, and we can just take the payoffs that are coming in and give them liquidity and buy them out of the fund. And so that liquidity and diversification, simplicity and joy, I've found when investors have really tried a bit of both, a fractionalized direct investment and a pooled fund. If the pooled fund is a good fund, it's a much better experience. It's more peaceful and joyful and better protected.
Let me ask you about the 30% leverage. Is that with a regular, typical bank?
We have a line of credit with a local bank that is 8 million for us. We can go up to that 30%. We use a little bit of fixed debt, so we have a few pension funds, retirement funds that just lend to us in that secured lower risk position. and they make a lower yield than what our equity investors make, but they like it because it's peaceful, very secure part of our fund. And so it works really well to us because it gets us a little higher arbitrage. Our cost of funds is lower on that debt.
I was going to say, what does the bank charge you, and what do the pensions charge you?
Yeah, with the pensions, we're in average about 6.5%, and then the bank is slightly higher. I think we're at 7 or 7.25. It's tied to prime, so it's been coming down a little bit later lately. But the bank is a daily in and out line of credit, so it's very efficient use of debt. We literally borrow on it and pay it down every day, whereas our fixed debt tranches, we pay that debt month in, month out, whether we have that. So we stack the two together, and that allows us to really optimize the deployment, a bit of fixed debt and then a revolving line of credit. And we found that that's the optimal mix.
Well, the other part that's good, you get a little bit of extra leverage or a little bit of arbitrage, and that gives you to be able to give 10% to your clients. But also, it helps manage cash flow because, if you have a bunch of people coming, a bunch of deposits coming in, and you got no place to put it, you can't pay paying those people 10% while it's sitting in the bank at nothing. So to have a little leverage, you can always pay that leverage down.
Yeah, that's right. Because otherwise investors are concerned. If you don't have loans, what are you going to do with that money? Are you either going to dilute the yield? We don't want that. Or are you going to send me the money back when I don't want it? And we don't want that. And with that little bit of use of debt, we've had to do neither. We don't have to dilute the yield of the fund because we just pay down the debt. And we also don't have to send money. We've never sent money back to investors like, hey, we can't keep it earning. We just have never been in that situation. I'm very thankful.
Or one other situation that could happen that you don't want is you just fund a loan just to fund it to get it deployed, and then your mind's going, oh, wait a minute, we shouldn't have done that. So that's actually very smart.
Yeah, so we can feel a little less deployment pressure because if we're sitting on cash, we could pay down some debt, no problem. It actually improves the yield of the fund rather than, like you said, taking a loan that we go, we got this pressure to get the money earning, but we don't really love the loan. We don't want to be in that situation, and using a bit of debt has been the most helpful tool we found to avoid that kind of situation.
So why don't more investors invest in private funds? Because there are some people who just won't invest in funds.
Yeah, I think there's always the fear because it requires a level of trust. We have a PPM disclosure you got to read. You got to kind of understand what are the ground rules. I think it's a great document because it describes what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And our PPM has some ground rules, like we can't overexpose this much to one borrower or certain types of loans and things like that. But I think there's that trust level that people need to get comfortable with the manager and see their track record and their transparency, because in a pooled fund, you're letting the manager make the decisions with that. So that becomes a bit of an obstacle. Another potential one, I think, is people just don't know about it. They just think, they're just not aware that there's an opportunity to do that and to get those kinds of yields from a passive situation. Maybe the third is the SEC, the government regulatory body for investments, requires private funds to only accept accredited investors, which is a high net worth or a high income. It's $1 million net worth and or 200,000 income. And so some people, they just aren't aware that that's out there, or they may not qualify for that.
And investors using their IRA, how do you deal with that?
Yes. Yeah. It's actually probably close to maybe 30-40% of our fund is self-directed IRA money. And we just find that people love it, right? Because oftentimes with IRAs, it's kind of money just sit and forget. And it's a great fund because it compounds, right? And you can reinvest your monthly deposits that we send out, and it grows really nicely. So we can do it via self-directed. So if you have a custodian that allows that, and then we've actually been working with Charles Schwab as well. So people who have IRA money at Schwab can invest with us. Yeah.
Well,
so
that's really, because Schwab, I mean, to be on Schwab's platform is a nice little hurdle to you have to go through some due diligence because I know that they're kind of strict. So that's a little in your cap. And so what are the different ways that investors can invest in real estate debt?
Cole, why don't you mention if people don't have a self-directed IRA, how they can, and then two different types of people on Schwab. I think that might be helpful to kind of answer Edward's question.
Yeah. So regarding IRAs, you want to find whether you have like a Schwab or Fidelity, ask if you can invest in alternatives and see what they say, or you can just go the self-directed route. So we work with a custodian called Vantage, and you can invest in private companies, invest in real estate, invest in notes, whatever you want to do. And there's a lot of options out there for self-directed IRAs, so that's the best way to do it. With Schwab, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say,
Edward.
let me throw one thing in there too.
Yeah, yeah.
Is I just did this myself. I didn't want to, but I kind of had to. And then once I was bucking the trend, but then once I did it, I said, wait a minute, this is actually not a bad idea. I set up a Roth LLC. So I'm the manager, but the owner is my Roth custodian, and it's a lot of flexibility on that.
So I actually just came across a custodian. I don't know their exact name. I think they're called Rocket Dollar, but they have what's called a checkbook IRA. So it's a similar structure, except you don't have to set up the LLC. So you can just basically manage the funds as you want and then report once a year what the total value is and the valuation of it. And it's extremely powerful, right? Because the one kind of caveat with self-directed is if it's not owned by an LLC or a checkbook style, you have to report, and every time you want to make a transaction, you have to fill out some paperwork, pay a fee. And so it can add up quickly if you're not smart about it. And then the cool part about Schwab too is we've actually been working with investors who have an investment advisor that uses Schwab as their custodian. So they can go to their advisor and say, hey, I want you to allocate X amount to Klink loans. And the good part for that too is the advisor, their investment advisor, that's now under their bucket of management still. So they are more inclined to do it because it's not like they're referring funds out of their management. So
it's great. The RIAs love that because especially if they're charging based on AUM, they don't really have to babysit you much because it's not like your stock price goes up or down. It's just part of the portfolio. So you've been how old is your fund?
We've been doing this kind of lending for about 13 years, and we've been in this current form, Klink Loans Fund, for 8 years. So the prior years we're doing the same stuff. So it's about 13 years total, but eight years in this exact entity and format.
Pretty good to raise 50 million in 8 years. Yeah, all word of mouth, or
for the most part. We speak and educate investors, but we just got a lot of referrals. Once people experience what it's like, they tend to talk with their friends, and we get a lot of calls from people that are like, "Hey, my friend has had this great experience. Is it available for me too?"
And how easy has it been to redeem people? People necessarily they're not unhappy with you, but daughter's getting married, they're buying a house or whatever. You said
I can take this. Yeah, I can take this one, Jean, if you don't mind. So we have a 6-month lockup for new investors with us, and then we always set expectations that it'll take 1 to 3 months to get your funds back. But in the past quarter, this is kind of uniquely quick. But with our line of credit, I think we've been averaging 3 days to fund redemptions. And that's just because we can go in and out of it. And kind of like we talked about earlier, the cash flow management, it's extremely easy. So people love that because they've invested in multifamily deals where they're locked up for 5 years, right? Yeah. But in a debt fund, you can redeem rather quickly.
Well, it's interesting. So you don't have there's no covenant with the unsecured line of credit that you're not allowed to redeem investors. You're allowed to use your line of credit for that. That really helps.
Absolutely. It's very powerful. When we took years to develop this line of credit, and we've been able to grow it with the bank, and we knew there'd be great benefits, but it's been even more helpful in multiple levels. The ones we discussed earlier, but then especially this redemption issue. In most cases, investors call us up. They're like, "Hey, just like you said, Edward, my daughter's getting married, or I want to put a pool in, or I'm buying this second home, or I want to take a special trip, and I'd like to pull some money out. How fast can you get it?" And in the last quarter, it's been like, how's tomorrow or Friday? Like the next couple of days. We just need to click, and we can move you that money.
I think the bank, it probably took you a long time to get that line of credit. The bank had to look you up and down quite a bit. Because when $3 million fund, they're not going to be interested. But when you start getting 20, 30, 40, 50 million, then they start to get interested in you. Anything else we want to cover here? Because I have a couple of, let me just throw out a couple of fun things here. So first of all, Mountain Mike's Pizza in San Rafael. They're one of our sponsors here. Best pizza in Marin County. Pizza the way it ought to be. Also want to make mention for the Tahoe Lakeshore Lodge and Spa, they provide guests with an all-lake Front Hotel in South Lake Tahoe, where every lodge room and condominium has a view of the lake and the mountains. Enjoy fewer crowds and the fall leaves at the Tahoe Lakeshore Lodge and Spa in beautiful Lake Tahoe, where it's the perfect time to be hiking. You can call 800-448-4577 or go to TahoeLakeshoreLodge.com to make your reservations today. And the last mention is, you ever heard of Drinksgiving and Blackout Wednesday? Well, it's a very popular night for bars and venues. Did you know that the Wednesday before Thanksgiving often sees many people in town for the holiday? And if you're looking for something to do, San Fran Halen is playing at the Hot Monk in Novato, California on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Check them out, sanfranhalen.com. Friend of mine, Rob
Man,
Spinoza, who guitars, plays Eddie Van Halen. Ought to be a fun time.
It's a Van Halen cover band, right?
It's a Van Halen cover band, exactly. Yeah.
I wish I could be there. It's a little far drive from my house.
I'll catch a flight out. Yeah, we'll get on the next one over.
Yeah, you check them out. San Fran Halen. Yeah, sometimes those tribute bands are kind of fun. I gotta say.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to cover before our thoughts for the day?
Yeah, Edward, you'd asked the question about increasing. Sorry?
How do people get a hold of you if they're interested in Klink Loan?
Thank you. Yeah, Klinkinvestors.com. That's Klink investors.com. That's for investors who want to understand and get a deck and information from us about investing. If a borrower happens to be listening from Arizona and you're looking for financing, our website for borrowers is klinkloans.com. Klinkloans.com. Closing thought from me, Edward, you had asked that question earlier about increasing your income from rental properties. I wanted to give two specific ways people can do that. If the cash flow in their property is good and they want to continue owning it, then they could look at doing a cash out loan and taking that additional cash and putting it in a fund like ours. And if you borrow the money at 7.5-ish is what I think your rental property cash out would be at, then you're going to arbitrage those extra 2.5 points and you're still going to keep the property and get your cash flow remaining there, plus your tax breaks on the property as well. The second and final thing is investors are very familiar with 1031 exchange as a way to not pay capital gains, but that requires you to put it back into another rental property. And what I've found is when people are tired of their tenants and toilets, they go, I could 1031, but I'm going to have the same rental property and management challenges. So there's another alternative called a deferred sales trust. That's deferred sales trust. And if you contact us at klinkinvestors.com, we can get you info on this. We don't handle these types of trusts, but we have a good partner called Reef Point that does them. And what it allows you to do is instead of cutting that cap, when you sell rental properties or appreciated properties or a business, sell a business or sell even cryptocurrency, instead of paying that gains to the government, you leave it in the trust and it's kind of reinvested and creates a cash flow machine. So it defers all that capital gains and creates a cash flow machine. And it's a really powerful tool. You as the investor have full control over what do you want to invest that cash in from the sale of that asset or business. And so you can put it in funds like ours, you can put it in stocks, bonds, or other real estate, but it's called deferred sales trust. And you don't have the time pressure of a 1031, which is very difficult for those who have dealt or looked into it. And you don't have the like kind restriction, meaning you're open to all kinds of investment vehicles. So deferred sales trust is a really powerful tool for someone that owns an appreciated property or business, cryptocurrency, any appreciated asset, and they want to create some cash flow from it. So let us know if you want more information on the deferred sales trust.
Eventually they sell the asset and create, right?
Sorry?
They sell the asset.
They sell the asset and they get installment payments on it is basically how it works. And the rest of that principal, the equity, gets reinvested, including the amount you'd otherwise send to the government, that capital gains portion. It stays invested in that sales trust, and you only pay the taxes as you receive those installment payments to yourself.
Interesting. Oh, yeah, it's almost like selling it. It's like selling it.
It's like selling an installment sale to another party, except you create that structure with your own trust. It's a really powerful strategy, and it took me over 25 years in real estate to learn about it, and I wish I would have learned about it way earlier because I have so many clients that have done.
EST, that means Delaware Statutory Trust. So this is
deferred. This is different than those. Different than a Delaware Statutory Trust. This is a totally different strategy called deferred sales trust.
And it has to be an irrevocable trust, doesn't it?
I believe so, but I'm not the expert on those. Reef Point would be the people to talk
Regular.
about the trust details.
If it's revocable, then I got to, yeah, I'm going to guess, just total guess that it's irrevocable. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Best of Investing, and audience, tune in next week to the Best of Investing. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best of investing.
Thanks
So
a lot.
long.